August 15th, 2013. You know, everyone has fears and stuff, even people like me who kill other people. My biggest fear in the whole wide world is spiders. I can't stand them. The way their creepy legs are all long and scuddly, their little pincers, and they feel so weird. I have no problems with bugs or other arachnids, not even scorpions. But spiders! Shudder. And I heard you eat about 8 spiders in your sleep each year. God, I hope that's not true. However, after what happened this weekend, no matter how scared I am of them, I've developed a sort of respect for the little bastards. Or big bastards if you're in Africa, or if you work with stocking imported bananas. Even so, I don't want to be near one. Anyway, I'll go ahead and tell about what happened. And it'll make my skin crawl, I assure you. I had a girl of about 13 tied up in my shed, but I was down in the basement while she was still passed out from the chloroform. I was looking for a box of old tools I used to play with as a kid, but I was having trouble finding it. But I sure found something else. I moved the box of my baby toys and screamed bloody murder. Yes, I turned into a cowardly little girl when it comes to spiders. And there was a whole nest. They were just swarming around the concrete floor, and I hopped a fair distance away from them. Note that I did a little research after I was done with this whole ordeal, and found out they were just common house spiders. But still, they basically looked like black widows, except brown and spotty. I felt the phantom sensation of spiders crawling over me, and I sprinted back up the stairs. After shutting the door, I shivered, thinking of what to do. I could spray some Raid on the nest, but my basement doesn't have very good ventilation, so it'd smell like poison for weeks. I also thought, do praying mantises eat spiders? I didn't want to take the chance of it being the other way around. I literally stood against the door for about 10 to 15 minutes before something came to me, though it was horrifying to think about. What if I somehow caught the spiders and used them for experiments on the girl in my shed? But how could I possibly capture all of them without getting too close? I decided on a pretty good plan. I hurried to the shed to check on my girl, and she was awake, struggling and flipping out. I gave her a shot of anesthesia and then left again, locking the shed door behind me, just in case. Then I ran to the nearest store to look for flypaper. Of course, Walmart had it, and I also bought some fishing line. After buying my supplies, I checked on the girl again. She was still knocked out. Then I hurried into the house and started setting up my little traps. I secured the flypaper to long bits of fishing line, and there I had a sticky surface to catch the spiders without having to go near them for longer than I had to. So I trotted back down into the basement and took an old floor lamp I had from my teenage years and tied the traps to it so that they hung flat on the floor. I then carefully moved the lamp real close to the nest and jumped back from it again. Shivering, I watched the spiders go about their business, which seemed to just consist of scurrying. Finally, a few of them tried crawling on the flypaper and got stuck. I smiled and decided to leave them alone for a bit, heading upstairs to make a sandwich. During the hour, I checked on the girl repeatedly, knocking her out again if I had to. Then I went down to check my traps and was thrilled to see the sticky surfaces of the flypaper covered in spiders. But this was the tricky part, getting the spiders off. I took the traps off the lamp, squealing from fear as I ran upstairs again, the sheets of spiders flailing, creeping me out like super much. I took them to the kitchen and laid each sheet on my counter, then searched the cupboards for a jar. I found one, then grabbed some tweezers, goggles, rubber gloves, and the coat I got from Seth, and brought them into the kitchen as well. I was so nervous and very squeamish, I kept squeaking out of fright. Nevertheless, I put on my gear and went to work. I tried my best not to squish the spiders as I plucked them from the flypaper with my tweezers. For each one that was still squirming, I dropped into the jar. With the sticky stuff still on their bodies, they couldn't climb, which I was thankful for. But some went in missing legs or being severely injured. I eventually threw the ones I suspected were dead in the jar as well, just in case. It was a long and tedious task. but I finally managed to rid the paper of spiders, screwing the jar lid on tightly and poking holes in it with a screwdriver. It was time for the next step, which after the traps and the plucking would be step 3. I kept on my attire of rubber gloves, goggles, and the thick coat as I returned to my shed. The girl was awake again, but a little loopy from so much anesthesia. It turned out her name was Emily, which I always thought was a pretty name. She really didn't know what was going on yet, thinking that maybe something happened to her and that she was really in a doctor's room. "No, you're fine," I said after she told me this. "For now, anyway. I'm not actually a doctor, but I'd like to play pretend. You're my playmate for the day." "I don't understand," Emily whimpered. "I'm going to do little experiments on you to see how much pain you can endure until you die." With this, Emily screamed and I had to cover my ears. She started crying and I said, "Don't worry, it'll be fun. You're never too old to play." Emily continued to sob as I laid out some implements for the procedures. "Why do you want to kill me?" she shrieked. "What did I do to you?" "Nothing," I replied, organizing my tools. "You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You were all alone, right in my area I was scoping out, so I grabbed you." "I'd expect that kind of thing from a man," she said. "Ooh, you're sexist," I scolded. "There are plenty of female serial killers throughout history. I just happen to be your killer. Such a shame, too. So young." "Please let me go," Emily screamed. "I won't tell anyone about you, I swear." "That defeats the purpose," I said with a smile. "You came here to play, so let's start, shall we?" Over her cries, I started humming "Pop Goes the Weasel" as I took a little body butter jar and an old paintbrush from my table. "First, I just want to do girl stuff. Let's give you a facial. This stuff smells like green tea." I unscrewed the lid and set it down, dipping my brush in. You're kidding, right?" Emily whimpered, and she flinched as the cold cream touched her face. "No," I giggled. "I used to use this stuff all the time on my face. But then I mixed in sulfuric acid." Emily gasped, her eyes widening in horror. "Since the acid is just one ingredient, it won't start burning for a few minutes, but the original ingredients are green tea scented body butter, which this started out as. Then I added some thick facial clay, olive oil, and ground up almonds. It's all very good for your skin, and I also used to crack an egg and filter the white into the concoction. The yolk would have probably been unpleasant, but egg whites give your skin a nice glow." I globbed the stuff on Emily's face, making a very thick layer. I could tell it was starting to get hot because Emily was wincing slightly. Once I had covered her face, I closed the little jar and dug into a mini fridge I had recently put in. I took a Tupperware full of freshly sliced cucumbers and returned to the table, Emily starting to whimper and groan as the mass got hotter. "Please," she gasped as I opened the Tupperware. "Please wash it off! It's starting to burn!" "No, you gotta leave it on for a few minutes," I said, taking out 2 cucumber slices. "Haven't you ever had a facial before?" I placed the cucumbers over her eyes. She tried to shake them off, but they were sticking to the edges of the goop around her eyes. "These are really good for your eyes, especially for any puffiness and stuff. How does that feel, Emily?" Emily started shrieking as the acid began to corrode her skin. To my amusement, the edges of the cucumbers were also being dissolved. It was fascinating. As Emily screamed, I cut down her shirt with my scissors, exposing her tiny belly and an A-cup bra. It was all frilly and cute, and I was jealous because bigger bras are almost never cute. I was also envious of how skinny she was. This pissed me off a little, which made me even more eager to start. Stupid skinny mini bitches. I'm curvy, and I'd like to think curvy women are more sexy. I mean, I'm not fat per se, but off topic. She kept wailing and struggling, jerking her head from side to side. I heard her skin sizzling and decided that perhaps it was time to take the mask off. I wet a washcloth in the basin and started wiping off the cream, which apparently was hurting her raw skin quite a lot. Then I tried removing the cucumbers, but they had fused to the skin around her eyes. I laughed and simply left them there for now. Tears were streaming down Emily's face through the slices, her sobs coming in soft whimpers. She wasn't struggling anymore, which made me think she ran out of energy. You'd think that someone so skinny would be in better shape, but who knows, maybe she was starving herself. Anyway, next I took a pair of pliers that had a small end for precision. "I know you can't see right now," I said calmly, "but that's okay. I'm going to do your nails. You'll just have to trust that they will be so very pretty." I had a package of sparkly pink fake nails ready to go. As Emily continued to whine, I carefully clamped the pliers onto the tip of her thumbnail. But first, we have to get rid of these ugly nails. I jerked my arm up, and Emily let out a high-pitched shriek as I ripped the nail clean off. I continued, working quickly, tearing off the nails on her remaining fingers. There was a fair amount of blood, so I had to blot the wounds, otherwise it'd interfere with the stickiness. When the blood was finally dry enough, I started applying nail glue to the fake thumbnail. "So, do you have a boyfriend?" I asked Emily, and she flinched as I pressed the nail onto her thumb. She whimpered again as the glue stung her wound. "I take that as a no. That's okay. Boys are stupid when they're young. Actually, they're stupid in general, but they're here to stay. Just gotta live with them, huh?" With each fake nail glued to her fingertips, Emily flinched and made sounds of pain. "Isn't nail glue just super glue?" I asked her. "I think it is. No wonder it's hurting you." Once I was done with that hand, I moved on to the other one. Her crying was much more quiet now, as if she had given up completely. Perhaps her emotional pain was much greater than her physical pain. As I was working on her ring finger, she finally spoke. "Please, just kill me," she squeaked. "Why do you have to torture me? Just kill me." "But we're not done having girl time," I said, moving to her pinky. "There's still so much more to do. A young girl like you should die looking your best. Though, I'm not going to do your makeup because it'll defeat the purpose of the facial." "Just kill me!" she screamed. I sighed, putting the nail tools away and grabbing a black Sharpie and a scalpel. "Kids these days don't know how to listen," I said in a disappointed tone. "That's why I feel sorry for teachers. You guys never follow directions because you just don't listen." I took the lid off the Sharpie and started drawing on Emily's tummy. I was a great student, always listened and read directions properly, followed rules, almost never missed a day. When we'd read out loud in class, I could never understand why other kids were so bad at reading. They'd act as though periods were commas, try to sound out the simplest of words, reading really slowly. I have always been a great reader, I continued. Though sometimes spelling will come as a challenge, but spelling is not something you learn as much as it is a gift. You could be the greatest reader in the world and still misspell stuff. But I read out loud as well as I did in my head. I knew what punctuation meant what, and there were only a couple words I had to pause at to try and sound out. But if you know what the vowels sound like, it's really easy. "Just shut up!" Emily yelled, and I stopped drawing for a moment. "I don't give a shit about anything you're saying. You're acting like this is just a normal thing. You're acting like we're friends. But you're torturing me. My face and fingers hurt like crazy. I have vegetables on my eyes." "Cucumbers are fruit," I pointed out, and Emily screamed in frustration. "I don't care! Just fucking kill me already!" She started crying again. "I'm so tired of this. Just end it. What are you even doing to me right now?" "I'm drawing," I replied, "and watch your language, young lady." "Fuck you!" I continued with my doodle, ignoring her. I was pretty good at drawing, so I was able to sketch a pretty rose, starting at her ribcage and ending just above her belly button. "There," I said when I was done. "Emily, have you ever thought about getting a tattoo?" She didn't answer. "I'll take that as a maybe." "Well, Emily, I'm going to do something a little more permanent." "Tattoos are permanent, you stupid bitch," she snapped. "Goodness," I said in sarcastic shock. "Anyway, yes, tattoo ink is permanent, but sometimes you have to refresh them. What I'm about to do is scarification." I pressed the scalpel blade to one of the petals on her skin. She let out a high-pitched groan of pain as I slowly cut along my Sharpie lines. I sort of angled the blade so that the width of the cuts were bigger and more noticeable. Scarification is where you cut away the skin where your design is. I drew a rose, so I'm tracing it with this blade. And that way it will turn into a beautiful star. Not that you'll live that long to see it. "Stop it! Stop!" Emily screamed, and she jerked against her bindings, making my blade slip. "Ah!" I shouted, and stabbed her in the side, which made her cry out more. "You made me mess up! Now the rose will look weird!" Emily continued to writhe. "Stay still!" I stabbed her again 3 more times in the same side. As she bled and cried, I grabbed the cucumber slices and ripped them off of her eyes. She emitted another ear-shattering screech, and there were now red rings around her eyes, oozing blood. I glared into her great eyes, and she looked terrified. "You want me to kill you quicker?" I hissed through my teeth. I had never gotten this mad at a victim. "Keep struggling, and I'll make sure your torture lasts a very, very long time." Emily closed her eyes tight, still sobbing, but no longer struggling. She stayed completely still, save for a few flinches, as I finished carving the rose into her skin. Nothing could stop her cries of pain, nor her sobbing, however. At last I was done, and I wiped away the large amounts of blood on her tummy with the damp cloth. Except for the long line on the stem, it looked pretty good. Maybe I can make that another leaf, I said to myself, and carefully continued the line into the shape of a leaf. It looked a little out of place, but there was nothing else I could do. There! See, Emily? That wasn't so bad. I practiced on myself a few weeks ago. Look! Emily turned her head wearily at me as I pulled my jeans down slightly to expose my hip. There's a carved ribbon tied into a bow, still in the healing process. It's healing quite nicely. I might have to go over it a few times, though. I had to pick something easy since I was drawing it upside down. I hate you, Emily murmured, and I frowned. You're one of the nastiest little girls I've ever killed, I exclaimed. How many children have you killed? Emily screamed, looking horrified. Oh, I've killed lots of people, ranging from infants to really old people, I giggled, pulling my pants back up. I love killing old people because they are gross, ugly, and so stupid. Like, they don't even know what they're doing, and they're mean and impatient, and goddamn ugly. Ugh! As soon as I notice my looks fading, I'm killing myself because I don't want to live a life being ugly. You're a horrible person, Emily continued to yell, and it was giving me a headache. You kill babies? Well, only if I see that their parents are horrible, I replied, setting down my scalpel. Like if they're negligent, or stupid, or drug dealers. Just horrible parents. I take the baby or child down with them. Those children would have probably grown up to be horrible people too, and then they'd bully the good kids, causing the good ones to kill themselves. I gotta stop that before it starts. I'm cleaning out the gene pool. As for everyone else I kill, they're already corrupted, so it doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a... Oh my god! I was getting super annoyed now. You're the one who should shut up, I said angrily. You're giving me a migraine. I think we'll wrap this up. What are you going to do to me? Emily shouted, but I refused to answer. I picked up my jar of spiders and shivered from fear. Ooh, I hate them, I whined. I hope I never do this again. Emily's wide eyes spotted the spiders, and she began struggling once more. I opened one of my drawers and took out a sewing kit. There was a thick needle with some strong black embroidery thread inside, ready to go. I would need to have them ready immediately. I slapped Emily across the face, making her shriek with pain again, for her skin was still burned raw. Then I grabbed her hair and bashed the back of her head about 4 or 5 times on the table as hard as I could. She finally stopped jerking around, though luckily she was still very conscious. I smiled at her, unscrewing the jar lid, and then forced her mouth open. The itsy bitsy spiders crawled into Emily's mouth, I sang softly, shaking the jar to pour the twitching spiders in. Emily started squealing uncontrollably. Gotta sew your lips shut so the spiders can't come out. Once all the spiders were in the shrieking girl's mouth, I held her lips together, grabbed my needle and thread, and started slowly pushing the needle through the flesh. Maybe they'll go down her throat and into her intestine, and the itsy bitsy spiders will never crawl again. I tied the knot, then stood back to watch her for a moment. Emily started shaking her head, panicking, squealing, and I shuddered as I imagined the feeling of those horrible creatures twitching on my tongue. I was finally happy to take my goggles and jacket off now that the spiders had been taken care of, though I was still unsure of how to finish the job. I had been too focused on the spiders. I sighed, figuring I should just let loose instead of being creative this time. I mean, come on, this girl was so annoying and bitchy. She had made me so angry. I grabbed a larger knife and held it above her. Sorry I don't have a bird to catch the spiders. I laughed, then started singing again. There was a young lady who swallowed some spiders that wriggled and jiggled and tickled inside her. I thrusted the knife right in the stomach, lined up with the rose's stem. She swallowed the spiders to catch the fly, then realized she hadn't swallowed a fly. I stabbed her a couple more times, and Emily was crying and gurgling. I giggled again. Perhaps she'll die! Then I stabbed repeatedly at any place on her torso I could reach, blood splattering all over the two of us, on the table, the floor, everywhere. Laughing so hard, I couldn't stop laughing. It was such a nice feeling to just let go instead of being artsy. I stabbed and jabbed and stabbed some more. I'm Not sure when she actually stopped breathing, but I kept going, and her skinny little body became more and more mutilated. It was almost a feeling of ecstasy, and I realized I had missed the brutality. Finally, I stopped, panting slightly. I stared at the bloody mess before me, the rose completely torn apart, and all her clothes soaked in blood. The only thing I didn't stab was her face, and I could see her eyes were wide, listless, and sort of puffy. See, Emily, if you hadn't made me mad, the cucumbers would have reduced that puffiness. I giggled. I also noticed that tiny bits of blood were seeping through the stitches on her mouth. I wondered if the spiders were still alive, but I didn't want to check. Before I did anything else, I took my scalpel and carved slut into her forehead. Yeah, I was that mad at her. Her family will be happy she's out of their hair. If I was her mother, she would have been dead years before now. Deciding I was officially done, I threw the body into a black trash bag, then double-bagged it just in case. I carried it over my shoulder back to my house, feeling creative at last. I spent hours upon hours covering the bag in thick papier-mâché, making the mass as hard and firm as I could. Then, when it dried, I took some acrylic paint and started painting it gray. When it came to putting in little details like cracks and speckles to make it look like a rock, I took my time. It was about the quality, and if I rushed it, my masterpiece would look like shit. It needed to look like a real rock, hence why I sprayed it with a matte finish when I was done painting. It looked so real! The only way to tell it was fake was to get real close and touch it, but from even a close distance, it was just a big-ass rock. I carefully brought it back outside and heaved it into my little red wagon I had as a girl, and pulled it into the forest. I walked much deeper into the trees this time, and they got so dense it was almost too dark to really see. It was perfect! There were no signs of humans coming in this far. I just hoped an animal wouldn't break open the rock and reveal the remains. Hopefully the thick layers of papier-mâché and paint would hide the smell. Taking the utmost care, I lifted the rock and set it down near a group of large, real rocks. You can always count on a forest to have great camouflage. For good measure, I scooped up some loose dirt and dusted my makeshift boulder with it to make it look a bit more natural. Then I remembered that it could possibly rain or something. The paint and finish was weather-resistant, but just how weather-resistant? However, it didn't worry me much. It'd take forever to actually find Emily's body anyway. I shuffled my feet as I headed back home, stirring up the dirt and leaves to hide any footprints. Once I was inside, I went down into the basement and sprayed the remaining spiders and nests with extra-strength hairspray. It was fun to see them struggle and freeze up. And at least the fumes weren't bad enough to affect the air down there. Sigh! Then it took a great deal of time to clean up the shed and myself. My clothes were ruined, but that wasn't a surprise. I really need to start buying black clothes to work in. However, even though it was evening when I finished cleaning, I was proud of the results. It was good as new. It had been such a good day, I made some macaroni and cheese for dinner and watched The Emperor's New Groove on Netflix. Then I chowed on some chocolate ice cream after dinner as I finished my movie. It was nice. I slept easily that night, having a peaceful dream about big pink puffs of fuzz with legs, but no arms, and eyes, but no other facial features. They were killing spiders for me, smile. They were so cute! So I concluded that I need to relax and just take a break from details, simply slaughtering people for a bit. It just made me feel so refreshed. It was exactly what I needed. Oh, by the way, Alexander's body had been found 2 weeks ago, and they explained what they found in his body. It was hilarious when they told about the rubber duck in his heart. I don't know how I managed to not get caught, really. It's not like I tried that hard to not leave evidence. Shrug, oh well. The longer I go freely, the more time I have to make sure my life is as fun as possible. I mean, you only live once, right? So you gotta do what you can to live it to its fullest. Alrighty, I've actually got my next playmate picked out that I'll go kill tonight, so I gotta get ready. I'll write about it tomorrow. Should be fun. It's another young girl, 16 this time. I've actually met her, and she's not a bitch like Emily was. Anyway, see ya! Kiss kiss!